Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Welcome to another video. In this week's video, we are going to be dipping our toes into the world of Nordic Noir. So, welcome back to another episode of Around the World in Books. Before we get into the books I picked to read for this, I thought I'd take a second to talk about what is Nordic Noir. I did a little bit of brief research. I will link the website down below that I found most helpful on this, that I pulled most of this information from, but the term Nordic Noir was created in 2010 by the Scandinavian Department of the University College of London. It is a subgenre of like thrillers and crime fiction, and typically to be considered a Nordic Noir book, there's a few things that it has to include. One is that it's usually set in a cold, dark country, usually in a Scandinavian country, or at least the detective is from that country. They typically have a darker tone to them. The murders are a little bit more brutal. It just kind of has that dark atmospheric vibe. And then most Nordic Noir books seem to include some kind of social commentary on their country, so I'll kind of try and be keeping my eye out for that one. The general consensus on what seems to be kind of considered the first Nordic Noir book is the Martin Beck detective series, and it was released starting in 1965. But that book isn't really what became popular. The genre itself took off much more in the 1990s. One of the things that really kicked it off was Henning Mankell's Kurt Wallander series, which he released the first book in 1997. And so that's kind of earned him the title as the father of Nordic Noir. That being said, it is only fitting that the first book I'm going to read for this video is the first Kurt Wallander book, Faceless Killers. Again, this is by Henning Mankell. This is my book that I chose for the Around the World Reading Challenge for Sweden. This one's one of the shorter ones that I have, so I will be starting with this one. Also, this is just like a classic. The Kurt Wallander series got really big. There's multiple TV series about him, and this one is book one. So basically what it sounds like is this older couple is found dead at their farm. Kurt Wallander's brought in as the detective on the case. And I think there's a lot of social commentary in this one about immigrants in Sweden, so it'll be interesting to see what that one is about. So this is my first book. This will be for Sweden. The rest of these are not necessarily in the order I'm going to read them. I haven't decided which ones I'm going to pick up next. I guess we'll just kind of see. The next one is The Bat by Joan Nesbo. I have no idea if I'm saying that right. Something like that. This is book one in the Harry Hole series, and this is my pick for Norway. I had a hard time deciding which one of these books to read first from this author. This is not the first one that was translated into English. I think a lot of people consider the third book in the series the best one, and that's the one that was first translated to English. But this one is technically book number one. And so I decided to start with this one. I think what a lot of people don't like about this one, and that kind of I guess is iffy on if it's technically Nordic Noir, is that this one's actually set in Australia. So he is a Norwegian detective. A Norwegian native dies in Australia and he goes down to investigate it, is the plot of this book. And so I think the first two books, if I remember correctly, are not set in Norway, and then we actually get back up into Norway in like the third book, and so that's why lots of people consider that one the best one. I decided to start with book one. I happened to find this at Half Price Books, and so I just decided I'd go with that one. So that's The Bat. This one is my pick for Norway. Okay, I have a feeling I'm going to butcher this name, but this is The Legacy by Yrsa Sigurdardóttir. I know I butchered that, sorry. But this is my pick for Iceland. This is the first book of a trilogy, I believe. I don't know what the name of the trilogy is. It might just be the Legacy trilogy. But this one, the main character is a psychologist who basically her job is to be a child advocate, where when kids are like witnesses of crimes and things like that, she can go in and make sure that the cops aren't like abusing these kids when they interrogate them. And so there's this murder. The only witness is this like I think 7-year-old girl who is not talking, and the main character is brought in to be the child advocate for this girl, and she gets kind of roped into helping solve this case because she is with that girl. So again, this is the first of, I believe, a trilogy. I think this one might be for a slightly younger audience. We'll see. I don't know if that's true, where Nordic Noir is typically pretty dark, but we'll see. This one's probably one of the thicker ones that I have for this one, but I'm excited for that one. This one's an interesting twist where you're following a psychologist mainly instead of the detective. Alright, and then the last book I'm going to be reading in this video is The Hummingbird by Katie Haikapelto. I could not find a pronunciation thing on the line, so I probably said that one wrong too. If any of you know how to pronounce these words correctly, will you please put it in the comments with like how to pronounce them? But this is my pick for Finland, and this one is following a detective who I believe just recently moved to Finland, and then these murders start happening that are somehow tied to like an Aztec god, and so she's basically trying to help solve them, but it sounds like it's not really saying it's on the back, but from what I can remember in my research, it was saying something that she's kind of dealing with being a new detective, and the older detective is kind of like, you don't know what you're doing, and there's maybe some immigrant issues as well brought up in this one. But I think this one's the longest out of the ones I picked. It's either this or Legacy. I guess let me look. Maybe the Legacy's longer. But that's my pick for Finland, The Hummingbird. So those are the 4 books that I'm reading for this video. We are going to start with Faceless Killers, and then I will kind of go through and I will let you know which one we end up deciding to read next. Alright, hello everybody. It's been a second since I updated this video. I have finished Faceless Killers. I actually finished this on Tuesday and it's now Saturday, so I took a break from reading the Nordic Noir because I had another new release that I wanted to read, but I'm back into it, so I thought I should probably finally update you on this book. I gave this book 4 stars. It was a really fast read. I flew through this book, especially the first little bit. I think I probably could have read it faster if I hadn't gotten busy with a few other things. I seriously, like, I picked it up on Sunday night and I read like 100 pages, so it really is a quick read. Basically the premise of this book, I think I've kind of already described it, but you're following this detective, Kurt Wallander. He is a detective in a small town in, now I'm gonna get the country wrong, in Sweden, yeah, okay. So he's in like this small town. They have a pretty small police department, and then they get this double murder, which is apparently really unusual. They haven't had to deal with a lot of murders. So you have this whole small team of detectives and police who are trying to figure out who killed these 2 people. In addition to that, you're following this whole subplot about immigration and refugees in Sweden, which I thought was really interestingly done. It was a little interesting because you only ever got the point of view from the policemen. You never had like characters that were refugees or anything like that. So it was just like how the police viewed the refugees, and I feel like you got kind of both sides. You got people who were really pro-refugees, you got people who weren't, and then you had some people that were kind of in between. I will say this book was more probably on the police procedural side than thriller. I feel like it was really fast paced and I still got through it fast, but it didn't have like the twistiness of a thriller. The ending's pretty straightforward. I honestly felt like it was kind of anticlimactic, but which is really where it came down from 5 stars. The main character bugged me a little bit, but I think that's probably going to be a consistent theme a little bit. I think in Nordic Noir, the main character detective people are often pretty flawed. That is Faceless Killers, that's book number 1. I'm now onto The Hummingbird. I started it last night, so I'm only like 14 pages in. So far this one seeming a little freakier. I think it'll be a little more on the thriller side where it's kind of suspenseful. I will update you more when I've gotten further in. Alright guys, it's time for an update. I have not been very good about filming B-roll, so I will try to be better on these next 2 books, but I have indeed finished The Hummingbird. I also came to the realization that I think when I filmed the initial clip, I was so concentrated on trying to figure out how to pronounce the authors' names that I don't think I even mentioned any translators. So this one's translated by David Haxton. So there you go. It would be helpful if they were on the covers, and then it would be a lot easier to remember to mention those. So, my thoughts on this book. I had a really hard time deciding what to rate it because there's a lot of stuff that I liked and there's a lot of stuff that I didn't like. And so it was just a little bit tricky to decide what I think about it. I'm still got mixed feelings. I gave it a 3-star. I feel like that's a pretty good even point for how I feel about it. I'll start with the stuff that I didn't like as much. I feel like bad news is always better first, but one of the things that I really struggled with in this is the amount of swearing. So just be aware, there's a lot of swearing, a lot of racial slurs. This book, just like Faceless Killers, has a big theme of immigration and refugees and stuff like that. And a lot of the racial slurs and stuff like that come from one of the main characters. So basically, I don't know how well I described the plot of this, but you have this younger girl who's been a police officer. She is now getting the opportunity to, instead of being like a normal patrol officer, to move up to be a detective. So she's moved back to her home city. Well, tricky to say what her home city is. She was a refugee when she was like 6 or something to Finland. So this is like her home city in Finland. She moves back, she goes to this new office where she's going to become a detective, and she gets this partner who is hardcore racist. And so you're following them trying to solve a murder case as well as a potential, what did they call it? Honor violence, I think might have been the term for it, of basically this girl who they think was getting like married away or being abused. Anyways, but the whole time she's dealing with this partner who is super hardcore racist, and he uses a lot of racial slurs. So if that is something that you don't want to read, I wouldn't recommend this book. There's just a lot of hardcore language. I don't know how much of that was in the original Finnish versus the translation, but yeah, that was probably my biggest thing against it. The second thing I didn't love about this book was it took a really long time to develop a lot of the stuff. The beginning was super good. I loved the setup. It was kind of feeling thrillery, a little bit spooky, and then it really slowed down and just not a lot was happening, and you're basically just following these characters around, but I didn't really like many of the characters at that point. Like, I just wasn't into them enough to want to get sidetracked by them, and I just feel like you weren't getting enough information to even make a guess. I had no theories ever in this book of who I thought it was. There just wasn't enough information until the end. That being said, the ending was really good. I did like how they wrapped it up. There were some fun little twists. It wasn't quite to the level of kind of your classic thriller book, but it was a little more twisty than Faceless Killers. And I will say by the end of the book, the characters had developed quite a bit, and there was some fun scenes between some of the characters, but it took us a long time to get there. Do I think I am going to read the next book in the series? Probably not. I'm not mad that I read it, but I'm not dying to read the next book. And that brings me on to the third book in this video, which after doing some further Googling, I realized I pronounced it so wrong in the intro. So let me try this one more time. This is The Bat. It is book number 1 in the Harry Hule series by Ju Nesba. I hope that was better. I'm sorry if I still butchered that, but from my Googling and from Reddit, that I think is how people are saying you should pronounce it. So that's this book. This one is also the first book in a series like the other ones that I've been reading. I think all of them in this video are. And this one's basically, you have your Harry Hule, and he works in Oslo, but he has been brought down to Sydney because somebody that was a Norwegian citizen got murdered down in Australia, and so he's gone down to basically assist in the investigation. I am a few pages in, nothing crazy, just kind of like the setup that he's down there. The Australians don't seem particularly happy that he's there, and that's kind of as far as we've gone. I'm gonna try and film a little bit more B-roll. I will update you probably when I'm done, unless I have something really pressing that I want to say while reading. Alright, hello guys. time for a major update. I have finished The Bat. Where to even start on this? I'm giving this 2.75. This has been my least favorite one so far. Basically, the beginning setup was fine. You've got this detective, he's going down to Australia because somebody from his country got murdered, he's going to help with the investigation, they don't really want him there, it's this whole thing. That part was fine. The ending was good. They had some interesting twists, the plot was fine. The middle bit was so slow and unnecessary and just thoroughly pointless. You could have cut out at least 100 pages in the middle and still 100% got the plot, cut out all the unnecessary bits that I didn't like, and it would have been great. But that middle part was just so bad that I just kind of skim read the book, was just so ready for it to be done. And that's kind of how I feel about it. There were a lot of unnecessary sex scenes in this, to the point where I found myself just skipping pages because I just didn't want to read it. And that was a big part of what I felt like you could cut out. I just felt like it didn't apply to the plot at all. There was no reason for us to be talking about this girl that he kept hooking up with. And he's like madly in love with her within 2 days of being in Australia, and it really has not that much to do with anything. So I don't know. Didn't love it. I don't think that I will be picking up any other books in this series. I know that a lot of people say that this is the worst one. Book 3 was the one that got translated into English first because I think that's more popular. But just, I don't think, it's not even necessarily the plot that I had issues with, it was all the unnecessary swearing and sex scenes that were just even one step beyond the other books that I've read. So that's my thoughts on The Bat. Didn't love it. This has been my least favorite one so far. That being said, I am on to my final book, which is The Legacy by Yrsa, ooh, I don't remember. I googled this a while ago. Sigurdóttir? Something like that. And this one is translated by Victoria Cribb. I am about 86 pages into this book, and so far I'm really liking it. So my hopes are up a bit. I'm hoping I'll get at least one book out of this video that I would actually recommend. A lot of these books I'd be very hesitant to recommend just because content. I would never blankly recommend any of the other books I've read because either they have lots of swearing and sex scenes, or they have tons of trigger warnings that I just would never blankly recommend to anyone, or just blindly recommend to anyone. That's the term. But this one's much more promising. That being said, this one has been much freakier so far. Something about this has been so much more suspenseful, make you feel like someone's watching you kind of vibes. So I will say this one's a lot freakier. This one also has gotten into a lot more detail about the murder itself. It's very disturbing and gross. As someone who doesn't do good with blood, it's been towing a line, but so far it's been doable. So there's been a lot calmer as far as other content goes, but it's been a little more on the freaky, gory side, less on the let's make our main character so flawed that this book makes you feel a little uncomfortable. So that's where I'm at. I'm about 80-90 pages in. So I will update you as I go through it, or at the end. We'll see. I've actually been making decently quick progress. So I'm hoping to finish this in the next day or two, and then we can wrap this video up. But let's jump into The Legacy. Alright, I have finished The Legacy. This has been my favorite book so far out of the series. I'm giving this one 4.5 stars. This one was also by far the freakiest out of all of them. It gets a little bit less freaky as you get through the second half of the book, but the first couple sections are pretty make you feel a little bit like you need to check behind the shower curtain and somebody's watching you. Basically, I don't remember how well I described this, but you're following this lady gets murdered, her daughter's the only witness. You're following basically the therapist that is helping her through it, and then the police that's trying to help solve the case. This one definitely qualifies as a thriller in my mind much more than the other ones do, which I guess makes sense because it does say that it is a thriller on the cover. But I thought the plot was really good. There were quite a few good plot twists. I guessed one little thing, but I did not guess the main part of the ending. I didn't get it right of who I thought it was going to be. But this one was much more like you could actually piece it together if you really were smart. I feel like the other ones kept pulling in just these random people that you were like, I haven't even, like, these weren't characters in the story. But this one, it's much more, you have lots of suspects, lots of them are in the story. And so, I don't know. The plot was a lot better. I also feel like this one was the cleanest. There's still a little bit of language from some of the characters, but overall, I think partially because they are trying to deal with kids in a lot of it, there's a lot less language, there's a lot less, like, there's no sex scene stuff really in this, so I really appreciated that this one was a little bit cleaner. Of all of them, I think this one would be the one that I would most likely recommend. I don't know if I'd still blankly recommend it because there are probably so many trigger warnings. This one is very gruesome. The murder is crazy. Like, it's super gruesome, and they go into a decent amount of detail, so that would make me hesitant to just blindly recommend this to everyone. But of the four in this video, this was for sure my favorite. And with that, we are now at the end of this video, so I thought I'd re-wrap it up. As I've kind of thought about it, I've adjusted some of the ratings on some of the other books, so I'll walk back through them and tell you my, like, final ratings on them. So the first one that I read was Faceless Killers by Henning Mankell. This one I have settled on 3 stars. It was alright, nothing special, didn't love the ending, there wasn't much of a twist. Then I read The Hummingbird. This one I have settled on a 3.5. I think this is probably my second favorite. There was a lot of swearing in this one though, is one of its biggest downsides, and I feel like the plot twist at the end wasn't the greatest, but they did keep a consistent level of intrigue going throughout the whole book. I don't feel like it dropped off at any point. Then I read The Bat by June Nesba, and this one I have settled on a 2.75. This one was my least favorite. I feel like their plot just was not good enough for the amount of gross content I had to wade through for this book. And then finally, The Legacy, we just talked about it, 4.5. So that is my experience with Nordic Noir. I don't know if I'd say that this is going to be my top genre. I think I would be interested in reading more by Yrsa Sigurdardóttir? Sigurdardóttir. I cannot say that. I think I'd be interested in reading more of her books. I don't know that I'm super interested in the rest of these. Maybe I'd come back to Kurt Wallander, maybe, but I think this is probably the only one that I am interested in continuing the series. So I still like my thrillers and mysteries, and I think this is a good place to look for them, but I do think they require a lot more research as far as content before you get into them. Anyways, that is the end of this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you've read any of these books or have any thoughts, please let me know down below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.